special meeting on roll call, please, Michelle.
Avon.
Here.
Caledonia.
Here.
Canisius.
Here.
Geneseo.
Here.
Groveland.
Here.
Lester.
Here.
Lyon.
Here.
Livonia.
Here.
Mount Morris.
Here.
North Dansville.
Here.
Nunde.
Here.
Ashen.
Here.
Portage.
Here.
Sparta.
Here.
Springwater. West Sparta. York.
Please rise and join me in the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm here for one purpose this afternoon. I just want to say I've worked personally with Ian for 3 or 4 days, just a tremendous job in opening the EOC this morning at 8 a.m. Our staff, our department heads, just everybody's really stepping up and just really proud of the job and professionalism that all our employees are showing and the work that they're putting into this. Privilege of the floor, I guess I'll just announce that if that's okay. I'd like to turn it over to Ian to kick off about where we're at and what we're doing and how we're preparing this county government.
Thank you. And just to, I guess, clarify, confirm some regulation that came out relative to the public officers law, excuse me, not public officers law, open meetings law, and access to public meetings. There is I guess you would call it a reprieve that was been issued or promulgated from the governor's office with respect to if you stream the meeting, have that allowance to stream the meeting, that you could limit public participation or attendance at your meetings moving forward, which we are enacting today to limit the crowd size of what otherwise already starts at 17 if the board shows up. So that's why it is operating like it is right now. So when we do have questions later on, I'll probably just repeat the questions for those folks at home who right now are just staring at me. We do have our official newspaper here as well. The LCN was granted access, and that's how we're going to continue. So obviously lots going on. I'm not going to kind of repeat some of the broad statements that you're hearing both nationally and at the state level. We all know what we're dealing with as far as a state of emergency at the state level, some national emergency declarations at the federal level, and at the local level, effective Saturday at 5 p.m., a state of emergency for Livingston County. We are now activated officially in a level 1 activation of the EOC. What does that mean? We've activated the EOC before on a level 1 basis, run up to a blizzard, expecting floods, etc. So you literally flip the lights on, you start getting situational awareness from your various disciplines, you track different things, you're in contact with different folks, you staff the EOC itself, and you sort of have it running and operating and people working out of that. You start an incident command system and a structure, which we've done, and sort of you get that ball rolling. We've been there since 8 a.m. today. We'll be back there after this board meeting, and we'll be there for the foreseeable future. Staff, myself, my deputies, Kevin Niedermeyer, Jennifer Rodriguez and her staff, and Julie Berry, Public Information Coordinator. So where are we at in Livingston County? So specific to the geographic borders of the county proper, we don't have an active, positive, declared case of the coronavirus affecting one of our residents. That being said, we have, as effective at 2 o'clock today, we have an updates, I think it's 13 individuals who we have in various states of quarantine. As you probably saw, Monroe County went from a 1 or a 2 case count to over 10 right now. Allegheny County has at least 2 positives. Ontario County, there was some thought if there was one there. So it's definitely surrounding and it's in the region. Why we're concerned about the coronavirus, I'm not going to get into. You've seen enough about that, I think, on television. The spread rate is is much higher than other viruses of the kind. There's no vaccine. It affects very vulnerable populations, immunity compromised folks, the elderly. To put it in perspective, a very sobering stat as of last night, that we heard that almost 400 people died in a 24-hour period in the country of Italy. Italy is a first tier, not a third world country, first tier Eurozone nation, and 400 people died. That's because the hospital system there is overwhelmed. So what you hear a lot of these terms floating around here about the coronavirus, et cetera. You hear flattening the curve. What they're talking about, the curve, is that upward trajectory exponentially of the volume of visits and participation and needs at the hospital system can bear at any one point in time. If you flatten the curve and kind of make it extended over a period of time, as opposed to an initial hit like this, you won't, in theory, overwhelm the local hospital system. So what we're trying to do with, I guess what the state is trying to do with some of the guidance on social distancing, on limitations of public gatherings, on things of the nature of essential services now, which I'll get into. They're trying to limit exposures, limit public-to-public contact, limit social interactions. Again, limit those large gatherings, because if you limit the spread, there's some thought that when the spread does start to hit, that you have some control mechanisms a little bit, you're a little bit better off in your control mechanisms to try to stop the spread speed. So where we are at, we hardened our defenses, if you will. We changed our policies and practices early on. In this case, stuff seemed to change by the hour, if not the minute. Home delivered meals continue. Senior nutrition sites were discontinued, suspended temporarily. Congregate meals, older folks getting together, that was discouraged. There's now some guidance that goes further than just discouraging, but that was done. Nursing home, visits for a hospice end of life situations only. We issued that guidance directive. That's obviously a very, very difficult thing to do. You have everyday visitors, multiple times a day visitors for people for years in that facility that saw their loved one. So that is the direct, real human impact of this virus and the controlling of public access. The staff are screened. The staff have changes too, in terms of wearing masks, personal protective equipment, things like that. We also are limiting access to certain governmental functions that are traditional county governmental functions. We said, okay, the recommendation guidance is, how do you limit, again, public interactions? We realize that it's the exact opposite of normal public services, but this is not a regular and everyday situation. We were already doing that and asking our departments to consider things like who's essential and who's non-essential in your department, who can work remotely, who cannot. Things like that. How do services go on if you are to receive a rash of virus impacts to your staff from a health perspective, right? So those are the things that we really have been top of mind for us. When I say top of mind, also, it starts with the protection of public health, safety, and welfare of the community. And when we think of the community, there are people that live with us, that are in the nursing home, the people that very much rely on us when it becomes the senior nutrition program. And we are then on the front lines as well in the service delivery piece. So all of those people that we talk about that we're saying prayers for as we should, et cetera, you have the public health nurses doing all of that work, the emergency medical services, paramedics, ALS, BLS techs doing that work, the sheriff's office, public and mental health nursing staff. So all of those people are top of mind for us as an employer and an organization to keep healthy and to make sure we're doing everything we can so they can continue to deliver those services. So it's protecting the health of the community. It's potentially in other situations, it's been life and death type scenarios here. So this is very sobering, very real life, terrible environments that we are seeing elsewhere that we do not want to see in New York, growing in obviously the region we're in and the county that we're in. Just today, there was additional promulgations, directives. They took the mask, I guess, of a guidance document that we're now told is going to be coming, if it's not already right now as I talk, an executive order type framework. That's from the governor's office today. You heard about the bars and restaurants, I'm sure, with the bar and restaurant issue, eateries, establishments. After 8 p.m., it'll be takeout only kind of setup. Obviously, that impacts all of those proprietors that are on our business and those small businesses. Local government was included in another directive that said follow the state's lead on attempting to reduce your staff count for your workforce by 50%. And then the guidance document that came out today also speaks to folks who, make your considerations of who is essential and who is non-essential. Obviously, you operate courts. The OCA has issued some directives on the courts, temporarily suspending operations there. So that answers some of your questions, I think, at the town level. At the county level, you should know that our communications back, my communications back on your behalf to the governor's office on the 50% threshold number immediately is that the county likely will not be able to meet that sheer workforce count that we have because of the nursing home as an essential operation, the sheriff's office as essential operations, the jail, public safety, road patrol, 911 center, public health elements, EMS, emergency medical services, and certainly a few other pieces that I'm probably missing. So a big one is DSS, I'm sorry. So DSS, social services. So a lot of those positions are deemed essential for the delivery of federal mandates that have to go out the door, whether it be SNAP benefits, and of course, with folks' lives changing out there, economic livelihood at stake, childcare and issues, schools closing. I don't know about the private sector job impacts that are out there because we're fielding a lot of calls. DSS, obviously, helping people out in that regard will be a big concern in essential service. When we have essential services, obviously that doesn't really relate when you talk about sheriff, EMS, and what the health department has to do. But when we have other essential services, we are going to very much be in a limitation of public interaction frame of mind. And calls when you can, online access and online formatting when you can, and things like that. But everything is very much fluid. We got this guidance an hour and a half ago or less. We are still in the midst of working with our department heads. We had a call at 2:15 with all of the county department heads, walking through some of these scenarios. Who's essential, who's not essential, what happens when you're not essential, can you get redeployed or reset to an essential position from a non-essential position, sort of like how does a show go on if we need it to go on, next man up, next woman up. So we are very much, that very much remains a fluid conversation. Let's see, what did I not cover? So the state directive on where all this shakes out for personnel, union, collective bargaining, compensation is also very much fluid. The state's guidance appears to be that if you are subject to quarantine, involuntary quarantine, a public health directed quarantine, or involved quarantine, that you would not be subject to using your leave accruals if you're a member of a public sector workforce. So probably like a paid administrative leave code. If you are a non-essential employee, the note is using remote work, telework potential if you're able to. And there's some guidance here that we're waiting to hear the directive on or the order on that speaks to not being charged accruals if you involuntarily are sent home, involuntarily are sent home or involuntarily told you are no longer to report to your physical location. With a workforce of 1,200 people, we realize that's going to be a very complicated framework to work through. And it's very much on the fly guidance we're getting. I understand why it kind of has to be that way because of the situation we find ourselves in. But that being said, I want you to know that a lot of our stuff is going to be subject to change given that we are in an emergency, et cetera. There will be a time in the very near future, possibly even within the hour or two, depending on these quarantines and depending on the test, that we have positive cases. And maybe I could ask Jennifer at this point in time to come up and give a little situational awareness and a briefing as it relates to what the public health department, the health department, and the county level has been doing in relation to the response.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So as you may be aware, right now in New York State, there are 961 positive cases. So we lead the United States the number of cases. We continue to have 0 positive cases. However, I anticipate getting test results on 2 individuals later this evening and 2 more tomorrow morning. Currently, the 4 tests that we are pending are the only quarantines that are symptomatic in the county. So all other quarantines are precautionary. And just to remind you, precautionary means they've traveled to an area where COVID was present and there was a possible exposure. Those folks do not have any symptoms. They have not been tested because they have no symptoms. The other 4 we've quarantined. We have 2 options of quarantine. One is to isolate the individual in their home and remove their family and quarantine them in another location. The other is to isolate the individual in a secured location. So we're doing that now. The next steps, we opened our 1-800 toll-free number, or toll-free 1-800 number, hotline for COVID. We are also looking at an EPI command post from the New York State Department of Health, which will employ epidemiologists to answer calls specifically for Livingston County and 1 other county. The other county has not been identified. I believe it will be Wyoming, but I cannot confirm that at this time. In addition, we're looking at the logistics for drive-through testing. More testing makes us more aware. We want to be able to test more people on site without having to route them through the emergency room or their local provider's office. Providers do have the ability to test on their own, but they do have to notify the Department of Health so that we can ensure quarantine measures are addressed. It will take us a little time to logistically set up for drive-through testing. We're looking at a couple of sites and options. They'll also be expanding testing sites in Rochester and Buffalo, but likely not as far down as Livingston County. So we are trying to be progressive in setting up our own site. Again, it's sampling. It's a nasal swab. 2 samples are required. And URMC would be our closest lab. They were approved, but they're not up and running. So currently our staff are still currying all of our samples to Erie County, and we're getting results. If they're there by 9, we're likely getting them the same day. So it should be anytime. And if it's after 9 a.m., there's a courier service, but we don't get the results till the following day. So we're trying to make that rapid and looking for better ways than having our EPI staff have to drive to the county labs. Questions?
Any idea where the drive-throughs might be set up?
So at this point in time, we have, so the question was for those watching at home that might not have heard it, is there any idea on the physical location of the drive-through sites should they become operational in Livingston County, which is kind of a little bit of a down the road, couple of weeks, but what we're looking at the old state prison complex in Groveland, the front parking lot, very large front parking lot off of a major expressway there with 390. In the past, we've used the highway department for either our drilling on this subject or our testing on the subject, or also on, think about like the hazardous waste sites. But with our emergency operations center in operation at that same complex, I'm leery about inundating that complex and one at Hampus Corners with traffic. So we're looking at a site that can hold it. And again, a lot of stuff to work out through that. That's very much in the infant stages, but you should know as supervisors, we're pushing for that big time because you hear our governor talk a lot about this, about the testing and how many thousands have been done, but how many per 1,000 per day is the capacity, and how we want to take that capacity up a few notches and then actually carry it out. So we want to have more people be able to be tested per day And then we actually want to test them per day when we're able to do that.
I'm sorry, will you have the drive-through open like 7 days a week, or just the weekends, or just the mornings, or just like all the time? Or-
Yeah, the question will be on the hours of operation for any drive-through testing site. It's premature to talk about the logistics and the operational specifics at this point in time because we're still fleshing them out. Good question, but we're still fleshing them out. Yeah.
The 1-800-COVID number, what's that for?
Jennifer, and actually, I believe it was a 1-877.
I know, it's toll-free.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The toll-free number, the 1-877 number, is to provide information for folks any time of the day. So it helps guide based on your symptoms, what kind of questions you're looking for, if they can be answered online, if you need to talk to somebody in person. Our communicable disease investigation team is fielding more than 100 calls a day, which we're thankful for because we really want people to reach out in the community so we can review their symptoms with them and point them in the right direction. The most important thing is to be able to identify symptoms before arriving to an urgent care provider or emergency room so that folks in those healthcare settings can have the proper PPE. And that's one of the ways the Department of Health can be a conduit for that. So I hope that answers your question.
What is the number?
You would ask me that. Let me get you the information. It's on our Twitter.
I was wondering, like, people who might be like mentally stressed out by this, or, you know, like how, is this helping with that too?
Certainly, there is actually resources available for that. We also have our mobile crisis unit, and our mental health clinics are remaining fully operational at this time.
And
Yeah.
we'll shift gears here. So let's talk about essential personnel. When do you think you'll have your hands around that? Who's going to be essential, who's not, and some sort of put in that position? So what do you feel on that?
Yeah, so the question of at the county level, who's essential and who's not essential, and when we're going to have that confirmed as best we can. I expect that probably tonight.
I guess the other question would be for the other supervisors. What do you feel about the essential and not essential? Our crew is very small. And we got bigger towns, what's your thoughts? Anything off the top of your head?
We're gonna go business as usual, now we're our library is closed. Here is our library, we become a daycare center.
Yeah.
Schools are closed and we're worried about that. The libraries are closed, for further notice. Court obviously is closed, we've got rid of our education pieces.
Yeah.
The education center right at large, and also recreation activities. Office staff and highway staff are business as usual for now.
Okay.
So some of our is different, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, that's where I was kind of leaning myself. I wanted to be consistent if everybody else had something different.
Well, we're not really consistent because one town now is completely shut down. I don't know if the other is doing, but that's what we're gonna do. So somebody makes a recommendation different.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Supervisor guy is saying, the thesis is gonna stay the same, we're gonna just, as usual, and if need be, we'll start working from home, we're all capable to do that. Recommendation or question maybe for Jennifer, for Mrs. Rodriguez. I really like the fact that when we came in, we were asked a few quick questions. We do have a meeting tomorrow night. We're not wrestling with whether to continue to have our meeting, just a small group. Is it okay to ask those questions that were asked as we came in, as we allow them to come in? If there's any symptoms or whatever, to maybe ask them not to come in, but I don't want to do something maybe into, illegal or consider civil rights. I don't want to do anything because I do want to operate as best we can.
Certainly.
And
I think my answer to that would be that the community would appreciate any vigilance that you can have at this time. The message that we don't want to give the community is to relax, because that would be very patronizing. We want to make sure that we're aware and that we're preparing. So those screening questions would be absolutely adequate. We are recommending any group that is not essential to not meet. We're canceling all outreach and non-essential meetings. If your group is essential, you're aware of the social distancing, but certainly starting health screening protocol questions are absolutely necessary. If so, we actually anticipate you do those over the phone before someone even comes in. That answers your question.
There's also the question of your forthcoming town board meetings and, for your villages or village board meetings. What we're doing right now is limiting public access underneath the new guidance, and we are streaming it. We realize that the towns might not have that capability, so as we see possible, we could look at some, guidance documents to send to you on, the what if of doing what we're doing and how it might look for you and operate for you. But as best we can, we're going to likely do this for some of our meetings. I think there's probably some additional directives coming from the governor on this. The CDC guidance that came out about 3:30 to 4 o'clock or so was on a number count of 10 of gatherings. From President Trump and the CDC, that came out within the hour and a half about gatherings. It's not a directive per se, but I would call it guidance. So that just came out. So when I say it's an evolving topic, we certainly mean it. Obviously, I know there's more questions, but just a couple of things on that. So 1877 number is set up. There's a specific section of the county website that is now live off the Public Health Department page that is all of the resources associated with COVID-19. So it's infographics, it's public health announcements, it's CDC information, State Department of Health information, and County Department of Health information. It also includes our press releases and media communications, and anything that we do at the county level related to COVID is all being pushed there. Resources as they come in, which I know they will be pushed there as well. I will sort of get out in front of this one because I've heard from a few of you. A lot of contacts are coming from the village and the town level as how we can help, or food delivery, for example. We obviously appreciate that. We're a community of volunteers here. We're a community of community-minded folks. So we sort of expected that word to flow as a result of what we're experiencing. That being said, we're trying to develop a mechanism where we can triage that. There are obviously available conduits to help in regards to that, just church groups, Catholic charities, things like that. So we're going to look there, but we certainly are hearing from some of the nonprofits and some of just the community residents. How can we help and in what way? Just so you know, the folks that are on the home delivered meal routes already there's no change. Home delivered meals are going to be delivered, and that continues. The folks that were going to the senior congregate meal sites, who were reliant, shall we say, on that meal for nutrition for their day, have been contacted and are being added to the routes. We are repositioning the staff who staffed those senior nutrition sites to help with that impact to the routes. So the person that was just assigned to the Mount Morris VFW that's now temporarily closed, suspended, is now going to help out with the delivery in that Mount Morris service territory area. So I wanted to make sure you were clear on that. What else do I want to cover here? What other questions do we have at this point in time from the board first?
At a town level, what advantage do we have to declare an emergency in our town?
Okay.
But
Yep.
for right now, for this, we can circumvent bidding procedures or whatever.
Yeah.
Procurement. But why yes or why no?
Okay, so.
Why did Springwater decide to do it? What is the?
Sure, yeah. So for those watching at home, Springwater, we're told via email today that they have declared a town state of emergency. I'll ask Kevin to speak a little bit to the state of emergency declaration process, but for our county purposes, it was to get out in front. I think we're potentially a touch different in terms of the reasoning. that a
The
town
county
level would
I
be.
understand the
Yeah,
county.
so, yeah, okay, so for the county level, I hopefully you understand the reasoning. For the town level, I don't know if unless I'm missing something, Kevin, I think you probably are looking at if you needed or thought to need emergency orders that can only follow a state of emergency. More oftentimes, they're a curfew, suspension of civil liberties, things to do with gatherings or things to do with procurement and going outside of procurement laws. Unless you are contemplating those things or want those things,
No,
those would be, unless I'm missing something that Kevin would.
no,
The state of emergency process is, as Ian spoke to, allows the opportunity for emergency orders. So if the town of Springwater felt that there was a need to do that within their township only, they have every right to issue a state of emergency for that. And so does in a village, if they choose to issue emergency orders. The second component is much like when the state of emergency was put into place here in the county, it relinquishes all the basic resources that the counties have to the control of the issue at hand. So it puts the forces out, in front, ready to go, ready to respond. Now, the same token can be given to the state of emergency at a local level with a county, with a town and such. It puts those town resources under the control of the supervisor and the town board. All right, so they have more ready access to those resources than due process. Hey, chief, can I borrow that fire truck? Now today, chief, I'm going to use that fire truck as an example.
so in all reality, right at this point in time, there's no reason for us to be thinking about what the town into a state of emergency.
That has to come through your own type of assessment of your town and or village. You have to go back through and assess and feel that if you need to do something, all right, then issue an emergency order. The only way you can do it is by declaration of state of emergency. So, it's all of you going back and assessing your towns, your priorities. You take a look at your risk assessments, what are we up against, and then do an evaluation. But with the county's umbrella of a state of an emergency, collectively as a group as a whole, we're managing very well with it at this point in time. There must have been some sort of a need for a town to do that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I do agree with Kevin, and this is for Kevin. But I agree that the updates are great, coming from the board and from David, Michelle sending them out, your updates. I mean, those are the things that keep the town supervisors informed, so we can keep our boards informed and our employees. My question is, Kevin, and I think that's what Will's question, do you see any need right now in this county for any single town? Are you aware of any need currently for any of us to call a state of emergency? I don't particularly see that personally.
You put it better.
And I can tell you, this is not a shot at anybody. Currently, are you aware of anything in this county that should trigger a local, besides what the county's already doing, which is fantastic in my opinion?
No, I do not see that at all.
I'm not aware of them, that's what, but if you were aware, I want to know about it.
No,
And I know that we would be. if
not
you
at this
were.
time.
I just want to say right now, a special thank you for Ian and, Mr. Glenn and Ms. Priest and even some of the supervisors, because I'm brand new at this. And I've reached out to, and you folks know who I've reached out to, Mr. Rodriguez. You've been there for me, and this is new territory for me, and I can't thank you folks enough. And I didn't know, I don't, this doesn't come out wrong, but I'm sleeping a little better knowing that I have you folks and Kevin and everybody behind and got my back, and the supervisors that I know will say, hey, you aware of this, or here's, and help me. And I know everyone in this room would help me if need be. So thank you, and thank you for being there over the weekend, because I reached out, and you reached out to me over the weekend, so thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Appreciate your support.
Village elections Wednesday.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. The village elections, as of the governor's office call at 3:30. They, unfortunately, when I had to come here, they did not get to that topic on the call. So I don't know if I'm looking around. Is anybody okay? So we had asked them, the county administrator managers in the Finger Lakes region had asked them to address that issue. As of right now, they are going on, as I guess you could say, scheduled or planned. The Board of Election Commissioners called me this afternoon to let me know that they had gotten no guidance to the contrary, that they were not to go on. The county certainly has some concerns about that, okay, so if they are to go on, how do you mitigate and address the risk associated with them going on now that they have to still happen? And we've addressed through our central services department, cleaning, supplies, ordering, preparation, planning with the actual election inspectors themselves, practices and procedures. I think they were looking to, change up if they could as far as, who touches what when and what's cleaned when. I go back to uncharted waters, uncharted territory. This very much is the case there. But we're going to do our best with respect to if it has to get carried out. We set in motion the risk mitigation measures that I believe are at our disposal to do just that, try to mitigate the risk associated with having that.
Couple things, I guess, you did bring up the village elections, but what are we doing? The Village of Leicester obviously is not here to represent themselves, but has anyone from the county reached out to the mayor in the Village of Leicester? We have several churches. I've heard that congregation. Have we reached out to the churches individually, or are they aware of this?
Yes. So we have had lots of individual communications with mayors, or what I would call village representatives. And we instructed them or informed them today that we were going to, starting tonight, we're going to set up a distribution channel, an e-distribution list for the mayor specifically, for just like, it won't be verbatim because there's a lot of county specific stuff that will be not relevant or applicable to them, but it will be quite similar to the distribution verbiage that you are receiving at the town supervisor level for, for knowledge attainment and for sharing with your ranks and your staff. We are going to do that with the village officials, and we're likely going to be, we already are in direct communication with the school superintendents as well, and kind of what they're doing. They're primarily focused right now on the school closure impact related to, childcare, certainly the school impact related to education, remote access, et cetera. And then nutrition, which we have a lot of, free and reduced lunch and breakfast school populations in all of our school districts. And I know the schools are working on that day and night to try to, make sure that doesn't get not addressed.
If you can help stretch our ability to house people remotely, we talked a little bit about that last week. Do we have a plan B?
So I'm sorry, the question was.
Talk about the fact that there might be places available for people to be quarantined.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And we max that out. Is there a plan or conversation plan about other spaces?
Yes, good question. So the question was about quarantine or additional, what we call either surge or post-surge capacity, which again, back to flattening the curve and back to social distancing, a lot of new terms that we're using all the time now that we didn't use before and we didn't know what they were before. Post-surge capacity is the hospital's at its limits and doesn't have anywhere to house people. Or they're at surge capacity, or they're at capacity and they can't house anybody else. Quarantine would be in that same boat. If you have a person who has been affected or impacted, or is maybe being contemplated for testing because they think they might have it, symptomatic, etc. And they were a coach of a basketball team who just had practice last week. You're talking about a different level of quarantine possibilities, or minimally persons under investigation, contacts from the public health department than kind of a hermit on one of our hills. That being said, we do anticipate that that's going to be an issue. So we have approached the state again about the prison. We have heard about SUNY dorms. We have heard about federal. We have heard about 4 areas, I guess, 3 or 4 areas. Shuttered nursing homes. Anywhere there's a closed nursing home, that could be repositioned, repurposed to something else. Prisons, federal resources, I guess, some federal penitentiary, a federal building, whatever. And finally, SUNY dorms. So most of those as ideas are coming from the governor's office. We are certainly of the opinion with noise as a hospital provider here, and people using noise on a regular basis, 365, okay, pre-COVID, they're going to have some struggles with, the challenges of hitting that population. And a lot of our population already, if you will, heads north, who is already, the URMC, the Rochester Regional Health, Thompson, Highland, all of those places are serving another region component as well. So at some point in time, we have to address, and I think the governor is now wanting 5,000 to 8,000 new, I guess, hospital beds through the National Guard, or he's asked for the Army Corps, and I guess private contractors and trade unions. That just came out this afternoon to try to get this going. A lot of news was made about China and how in a moment's time, they, constructed a quasi-hospital. So I think what the governor's saying is he wants to, at the state level of New York, he wants to get out in front of the public health crisis level, the life and death crisis level that would and could happen if the hospitals are, at a point where they can't, see anybody. To that point, Livingston County has been an active participant in those talks with suggestions, with resources, with scouring our inventory of things that we've had from our old nursing homes, storage, and use of our central services crew down the road if we have to, for highway assistance with whatever it takes to construct, temporary kind of on the fly hospital units.
Key word just now, inventory. I think we're all seeing a lack of, in our grocery stores.
Yes.
Like that. So,
yes.
One of my concerns, inventory, obviously there's a stockpile. Hopefully there's a stockpile. We create the plan in place. The hospitals, the makeshift hospitals, triage centers, obviously that would be, if needed, places designated. What are we prepared for a mass cleaning or a mass disinfection of areas?
From a county building perspective? Okay. So I'll talk about the resources, I'll talk about the cleaning. So resources, we have a New York response is the name, supply chain channel that was opened up and is opened up in New York states of emergency. And we have a state of emergency in New York, and the supply chain was opened up through the Office of Emergency Management. So Kevin has been ordering items and supplies for use. And now obviously there's prioritization. If there's a hotbed, Westchester County is going to take precedence over Livingston County. However, we were able to procure, for example, the New York branded hand sanitizer. We were able to put in an order for masks. Think about the masks, the new order about tightening and hardening of the ins and outs of a nursing home. No communal dining, so they're going to dine inside. No visitation except for what I said before. You then have another directive to staff getting checked before they enter in the workplace. Temperature checks, assessment of how everything, and if they're 100 plus fever, they're not going to work. You have masks that are now required. Some nursing homes didn't have an inventory of masks and supplies on hand. We had 3,000, sounds like a lot. You go through 1,400 a week because of the shift work and because of the temporary nature of these masks. So we put an order in for, I think, 10 to 15,000 for the operation of the nursing home. So I believe, Kevin, is at the town level, is your system of supply chain, supply access or request available at the town level as well?
Yes.
Okay, so you could talk to Kevin afterwards if you are in need of some things, I mean, at least on that side. On the sanitary conditions, if we had to close stuff down, I think we've got, we've listed our services on the central services buildings and grounds as essential for some of those reasons. And I think we would just have to deploy those people to that site and go through that. You probably saw them around. I mean, we've already deployed them on a regular basis in May. Elevators, knobs, bathrooms, faucets, doors, things that get attention, but not the attention that they're getting right now. I don't know if that answers your question. Okay. There's some, Mark.
Word from our election commissioner, village elections are still on. As of now, that we tried our best to get them postponed, but I've had no positive response or indication of being canceled, so they are still on.
Can we get some extra support in the election?
We have that on order at the ready, and that's part of the new protocol we developed with the Board of Election Commissioners. So yes, we will assure that that's done.
The only thing I'll say is to just continue keeping us updated, send out the emails if you would. And it's a good idea to copy the village mayors. Is there anything that you need from us to help you?
Yes, thank you.
Or agenda? Anything us supervisors can do, or free up for you, you're more than willing to do that.
Sure, thank you. So the question was, what can the board members do? So on the subject of communications, obviously, I appreciate the feedback on what is desired or what is not desired, what's too much and what's not enough. So I think I would start there. That would be my ask, and you have done that, and I appreciate that. The communications, we will endeavor at least once or twice a day to push them out to you. You'll start seeing them if we can, everything's new to us. If we can kind of remember this, we're hoping to have those subject lines be in a chronological order. That's back to that state of emergency question and all of our historical timeline. So you're going to see 3/16 is the 16th of March, 102, 03, 04, 05. So you'll be able to have them too when they came out to the board at what point in time. We're doing the same thing with department heads, DH. We'll probably do the same thing with the mayors, mayors. So that'll be in the same style it is. When we talked about redeployment, repositioning, deputy county historian is a non-essential employee. I've repositioned that individual to the EOC with me in terms of the internal PIO. I'm the overall PIO. Julie is the public information coordinator, so she's external facing, press, communications, radio interview requests, going that through me or Jennifer. And Holly Watson is the individual's name. She's been redeployed to the EOC to help out with the internal communication, prepping for department heads, bulleted style, getting out information to everybody as quickly as we can. What can you do from the Board of Supervisors perspective? I think it's a testament to, I think I've talked to all of you about this probably, as far as what we can do, how can we help. We've been talking about that. I think it starts with thoughts around the vulnerable population, and a lot of those people. I think we talked about it with Sue, and it may be a point where the church groups and you as a conduit, we start some outreach efforts to folks, but I think kind of like wait to hear from us on that. Fully, really down the line, I mean, if we've got the home delivered meal program, there's nothing to say on a volunteer basis, you guys couldn't step up if we had people drop off. I mean, people asked about that on, the ranks of the supervisors. They asked if that was needed. I could step up or we could step up. So that obviously would be something. So, and then information exchange, information sharing, tempering down expectations on the immediacy of a certain level of public service that people are used to, at least kind of administratively. I have no idea when titles will be filed and when survey maps will be issued, things like that. That's a work in progress. We're working through that, but letting them know that, I think the one comment from the One Health Commissioner was, we're not asking you to do anything more right now than kind of sit in your couch, see your family, check on your loved ones, et cetera. But we know that people have some level of anxiety and we know that, so we're trying to help out with that as best we can. So what you can do for us is that we may need help with meals. We may need help with contacts in the community. We may need help with resource deployment. We do not know. So I think that's, at this point in time, that would be of a good help, great help.
So you'll let us know if there's something?
Yes, certainly, yeah.
To that point, if there's more people who will the meals, probably help.
Yeah, it does help. I mean, we don't want to close anything, but having people dedicated to a particular function that no longer exists temporarily is suspended, that was an easy one. We could kind of reposition those people. We're hearing news on DMV related activity. Something came yesterday that the state was closing DMV. That was for like state DMVs. It wasn't really for county run DMVs. That being said, we may have some closures ahead of us, either inside or outside of our control, that we can at least question whether or not we could redeploy assets. And
So DMV is as usual right now?
as of the DMV in Genesee, I think the DMV in Dansville will close, suspend operations right now. The DMV in Geneseo will remain.
Staff now, I think it's 5 members in DMV as opposed to 9. So they'll still be able to run this with reduced staff.
What about the county clerk?
County clerk, I think that's fluid. We are getting some stuff from the county clerk about what her staff count will be, essential, non-essential, and we'll get that all out tonight as best we can.
The county clerk right now will be at 5 staff members working downstairs.
Instead of
Pay no attention to those coughs at home.
Anyone else have anything further? Any other for the board? I'll move to adjourn then. Motion in the second, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That's carried.
Thank you.
if they use the prison scene program to get something for it, okay?
I'll try.